Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. Your Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show brought to you by Pluckers Wing Bar. Saints just added some offensive tackle help. We'll talk about that here coming up in about 15 minutes. Sharif Ishak talking Saints as well as an autopsy on the Pels season coming up at the bottom of hour number 2. Now let's talk some football. Blake Toppmeyer is the SEC columnist for the USA Today Network. Did a sit-down one-on-one with Brian Kelly, and it's been posted up at the website. I got a good look at that this morning, and he comes on the Jim's Firearms Hotline now to chat about it. Blake, thanks for the time. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It is our pleasure. Give me Brian Kelly's general mood here entering season number 3 as we sit here in the spring.
I think pretty upbeat. I think he feels like his defense is going to be improved. I mean, that's a low bar, right? The defense was a bit of a disaster last year. Even Brian Kelly admitted that, as he put it. If LSU could have played any semblance of defense last season, it would have been a playoff contender. I think he feels like they're more veteran, less reliant on transfers in the defense than a year ago. He obviously knows replicating the offense's production of Jaden Daniels and star wide receivers Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas is going to be a challenge, but I do think he fully believes in Garrett Nussmeier. Now, Nussmeier's not going to be able to run the way that Jaden Daniels did. However, I think he trusts his veteran offensive line, and he feels pretty good about his offense. So I do think, the key lingering question is he thinks his defense is going to be improved, but how much improved is sort of what remains to be seen.
I was fascinated by your line of questioning that I'll dovetail a couple of the questions together, but he said last year that entering year 3, you should really be kind of a championship level team program. And you mentioned how his teams at Central Michigan and at Notre Dame had kind of made jumps in year number 3. They played for a national championship in year number 3 at Notre Dame. How did he feel about you kind of bringing those to his attention and where his program is right now entering this 24 season?
Yeah, I was interested by what his reaction would be because, as you were alluding to there, when I sat down with Brian last summer, I asked him when he thought LSU would be able to be ready to seriously contend for a national championship. And he caused a little bit of a stir at that time by saying 2024. I think that was probably not the answer LSU fans wanted to hear last summer. I think they wanted him to say 2023, the upcoming season. But he didn't say that. And he raised some concerns, which proved correct come fall, about his defense. And so I wondered, would he backpedal from those comments at all whenever I brought it up? And, he made no guarantees, no bold predictions. He didn't go Joe Namath or anything and say, yes, we will win the national championship this year. But he also didn't backtrack. He didn't backpedal. When I reminded him that he said 2024 would be the year that they can contend. Now, contend is different than win a national championship, right? But he doubled down on that. He said, quote, no doubt he thinks LSU is in position this year to contend for a national championship. And the reason he says that is he feels like this program is more solid in the areas that are required to contend for a championship. And what he means by that is more depth. He thinks he has more depth within the program than he's had at any time in his tenure. I think he feels like this team is a little bit more veteran, a little bit more sign and develop guys. Certainly they still need production from transfers, and they'll probably look to add a couple more here in this window. But I think he feels like it's more reliant on guys that have been in the program for a few years. So in all those areas, I just think he feels more comfortable at this time this year than he did a year ago. Now, we can sit here and say, yeah, but how's he going to replace Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors? And I think, he didn't quite come out and say this, but I think Brian Kelly would admit you're not totally going to replace the production of those type of guys. And that's why the defense has to be better, particularly the top talents on defense, including Harold Perkins, have to perform better than they did for a year ago for Kelly's timeline to prove correct. They can contend this year.
Chatting with Blake Toppmeyer, SEC columnist for USA Today. He's got a sit-down interview with Brian Kelly that's up on the website right now. I highly suggest y'all go ahead and check it out. We're hitting some high points here, but to read the thing in its entirety is well worth your time here as an LSU fan. Blake, I'm curious, you talked about the kind of hole, for lack of a better term, that Nick Saban leaves in the SEC moving on, and you mentioned that with Brian Kelly. What was his reaction?
Yeah, he didn't really bite at that one. I wondered if maybe he would, but he didn't bite at that. He said, and I found this truthful. I mean, he really endorsed Kalen DeBoer. Said he believes he's an outstanding football coach, and I mean DeBoer's track record throughout his career would suggest that that's true. Got Washington to the national championship game last year. Did a warp speed turnaround within that program. Really, has been a winner everywhere he's been. And so, what Brian Kelly said is that maybe it allows LSU's focus to be even more internal and not have to kind of worry about Saban looming out there. He didn't say the path would get easier, but maybe that the focus would be a little bit easier with Saban out of the picture. But, the other thing I asked him, if you recall, when Brian Kelly came to LSU, he talked a lot about wanting to run toward the challenges of the SEC, and that being one of the reasons why he left Notre Dame, an independent, for LSU, was the opportunity not just to coach LSU, but to coach in the SEC. And he said after he was hired that the face of that challenge was Nick Saban. And so now he's played Saban 2 years. He went 1-1. Saban retired, and I asked him, is there a new face to that challenge? And perhaps unsurprisingly, Brian Kelly said, it's Kirby Smart. And he went on to compliment other coaches in the league, obviously, but he sees Kirby Smart as the new face of the challenge, the new hurdle, kind of directly impeding LSU from SEC championships, from national championships. And probably not uncoincidentally, I think Brian Kelly is trying to build LSU's program in a similar way to what Kirby has done at Georgia. Kirby is using the portal as a way to fill in some of the cracks to boost his program, but Kirby's still largely doing it through kind of the old school way of sign, retain, develop. But the key to that is you have to be signing elite prospects. That's what Kirby Smart did. That's what Nick Saban did before him. And now we're starting to see in this 2025 recruiting class, still 7 months from signing day. However, in the early stages here, this is looking like it's going to be Brian Kelly's best signing class since he's been LSU's coach.
I realize these are just interviews, and you're not following them around for months at a time. But I'm just curious your thoughts on this. This is an exhausting job being a college football head coach these days with the transfer portal and the different signing periods and everything that goes into all of this. And Brian Kelly is not 38 years old anymore. I'm curious how hot you think he burns these days to try to climb the mountain in Baton Rouge.
I think he's pretty motivated. He didn't come out and say this, but I think he left Notre Dame in some part to try to put the national championship exclamation point on his career. I think he believes fully he can get that done at LSU. LSU's history would suggest that that's very possible. Brian Kelly's history would suggest that's possible. I mean, this, as we know, this guy's not just a consistent winner. He's been a high-level winner throughout his career. Now, he has had a tendency throughout his career to lose some of the biggest games. I think he sort of bucked that trend in year one at LSU by putting that feather in his cap of beating Nick Saban in that first SEC matchup. Kelly had faced him before at Notre Dame, but in the first time facing LSU, Alabama, got Saban the first time. So he reversed that trend a little bit, but then, last year that sort of flared up again of coming up short in the biggest games. So, that's one narrative that I guess Brian Kelly has to overcome, but I do think, I do think he does burn pretty hot to try to get that national championship at LSU, and I don't sense any sort of peaking from him toward retirement. When I asked him about Saban's retirement, he said, he's sad to see Saban go because he admired and respects Saban as a coach and liked going up against him. But he didn't really offer any indication that was somewhere he was thinking. And just my own feeling would be that that's probably, at least a few years down the road for him at 62 years old.
As you personally kind of survey the conference with Oklahoma and Texas coming in, Nick Saban moving out, divisions on the way out, where do you think LSU kind of stacks up as a program entering 2024?
Yeah, I think probably that second tier. If we're talking about the first tier, I would put obviously Georgia on that tier, headlining that tier. I'd put Texas on that tier. I'm really impressed with what Texas brings back. I was impressed with them all last season. And then I think we kind of get into that second tier. That's probably headed up by Ole Miss. You look at what they achieved last year, what they bring back, what they supplemented via the transfer portal. I think this is Lane Kiffin's best team that he's ever had, and coming off of a really fine season last year. I think they head up that second tier. And then I think also in that tier, you have Alabama, you have LSU, you have, I think to a certain degree, Tennessee, and Tennessee's schedule is more accommodating than Alabama or LSU's, which I think helps put them into that tier. And I think still nipping on the heels of that second tier as well would be Missouri. Missouri brings back a lot of production from last season, a team that was really good last year, and LSU had its hands full with their right until the end. They bring a lot back, and much like Tennessee, I think Missouri's schedule is pretty accommodating. So that's kind of how I see it. I think that's 7 teams I mentioned, 2 in the top tier being Georgia and Texas, and then 5 in the second tier. I would be surprised if someone makes the playoff outside of that list of 7. But from that list of 7, I think the SEC could have about 5, maybe even stretch it to 6, but probably more realistically 5 playoff qualifiers from that group of 7 teams that I mentioned.
He's Blake Toppmeyer, SEC columnist for the USA Today Network. You can follow him on Twitter at @BToppmeyer. Has a sit-down interview with Brian Kelly that's posted up there. Highly recommend y'all check it out. We appreciate some time, Blake. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. Good talking to you.
Always good to talk a little bit of football this time of year as we kind of put spring in the rear view mirror. Kind of got some eyes on SEC Media Days coming up in a couple of months. I don't love to start looking at that because it feels like I'm shutting the door on my beloved baseball season, but I think we're all aware of where that sits right now. So it's a tenuous spot here for LSU baseball, and that's some hope for LSU football as Brian Kelly feels pretty good about where things are headed across the street there at Football Ops. We appreciate Blake for coming on and shedding a little bit of light on all that. Sharif, hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.